To this webinar on prosody and language acquisition. My name is Daniel Carey. I'm director of the Moore Institute at NUI Galway. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Francesca Nicora of NUI Galway. This session forms part of a series that's been developed by Laura McLaughlin and John Walsh, who are co-directors of the Center for Applied Linguistics and Multilingualism, CALM, at NUI Galway, which forms part of the Moore Institute. We've had a great sign up tonight of 75 people. Thank you very much for joining us and supporting the event. I'd like now to hand over to John, who is going to be asking the questions and hosting this evening. John.
Good evening, Dan, and good evening, everybody. And you're all very welcome at just after 6 o'clock here in Galway to the March seminar in the CAM series. And it's great to see so many people register. We're looking forward to a really good discussion. And similar to our approach last month, I'm going to be doing a Q&A format with our speaker this evening. So quite relaxed and informal, but getting through the material nonetheless. And I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, Dr. Francesca Nicora. And Francesca is currently working with us here in NUI Galway. She's a member of CAM and is a teaching assistant in the Department of Italian. She's also a research assistant to the LILAC project on language learning, which is directed by the co-director of CAM, Laura McLaughlin, who's here with us this evening, and Laura will be managing questions from the audience later on. And Francesca has been working recently on the creation of online modules and training materials to assist language teachers and learners in the transition to the online from the face-to-face digital, from the face-to-face to the online digital learning environment. So very topical indeed. Francesca speaks several languages. She has a BA in foreign languages and literatures, focusing on Bulgarian and Russian, and an MA in theoretical and applied linguistics, and also an MA in e-learning and e-teaching Italian as a foreign language. And she recently completed her PhD in NUI Galway in Italian studies, and she's writing a book on the issues in relation to prosody at the moment. So you're very welcome. Good evening, Francesca, and welcome to the seminar. And I'm going to start off with the obvious question: what does prosody mean, and why are you interested in studying the prosodic features of speech?
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks to this introduction and to give me the opportunity to talk about prosody and language acquisition this evening. And so good evening to all of you. Okay, so first of all, I want to just say a few words about the term, okay, the term prosody. So I share my screen. Okay, so traditional classical studies of linguistic prosody originally returned us to music. So prosody was considered as a part of grammar focused on poetry. So the rules concerning the shortness and the length of a syllable or a combination of a long and short syllable to form and create what we call the rhythmic pattern of Greek and Latin poetry. So the term derives from ancient Greek, okay, and it meant a song accompanied by music, or also accent mark and modulation of voice. It's combined by a suffix. It means pros. It means to, forward, and near, and the stem of the word oide. Okay, so song and poem. So recently, Wennerstrom in 2001 defined prosody as the music of everyday speech. So nowadays, when we talk about prosody, we talk about the study of intonation, stress, accent, of course, syllables, and rhythm, and pauses as well. Because every language has a melody, okay? So prosody is the melody of speech. But every state, every region, every city has an accent, an intonation, and everyone has an intonation. So I want also to answer your question about my interest in prosody. So you introduced myself, so thank you very well. And I want to just to say a few words about my biography as well, because it's very closely related to my interest in prosody, because I've always been curious about languages and cultures and alphabet. So I choose to study ancient Greek and Latin in high school, and then Bulgarian and Russian at the university. I completed a bachelor degree, a master degree. I spent 1 year in Sofia in Bulgaria as an Erasmus student. And when I came back to Italy, I decided to foster my skills as an online teacher of Italian to foreigners. And then in 2014, I won a scholarship at NUI Galway and then moved to Ireland. So yes, I'm a little two users of English. And the most difficult thing for me is how to speak properly in English, for example, or the target language, and how to use the prosodic features of speech to be more comprehensible to native speakers. And as in my career as a student, I've never attended training courses about prosody. So my aim now, my message today is that we need to do research in the field of prosody and didactics, because we need to find an effective method to teach prosody. So that's why I'm very interested in this field. It's a very personal personal reason.
Okay, very good. So what then are the prosodic features of speech that are considered to be relevant when learning and teaching foreign languages? What features are involved?
Yeah. Well, the aim and the goal when you acquiring a foreign language is to interact and communicate with native speaker. But the inappropriate perception and production of, well, intonation and prosodic feature like such as rhythm, for example, may give rise to misunderstandings and sometimes lead to the failure of communication. So the important is to learn prosodic feature to communicate better. That's the point. And also prosody has several linguistic functions. So I want to show you just some example here. Okay, so as you can see here, the first linguistic function is to sign information status of a sentence. For example, here in English, and maybe you, John, can help me here, because when you emphasize a specific word, okay, within a sentence, the meaning changes. So if I say, for example, I didn't say he stole the money, it means I think someone else took it. But if I stress the negation in this sentence and I say, I didn't say he stole the money, in this case, that's not true at all. This is the meaning. So another function is, for example, to define speech functions. So I prepare here some examples, some polar questions. Polar questions are yes or no questions. So a question to which you respond with yes or no. In the first two sentences in English and in Bulgarian, I underline a question word. And in this case, you don't have to use your intonation to sign that this sentence is a question. So in English, you say, do you speak English? Or in Bulgaria, you say, govoriš li angliski jezik? But you don't use intonation. But in Italian, for example, and in Russian, you have to use it, okay? So in Italian, I say, parli inglese? And in Russian, I say, ti govoriš po angliski? говоришь по-английски? Okay. And this is what happens, for example, for syllable and stress languages. But what happens when we have tonal languages? They are very, well, different because intonation is fundamental, is relevant, okay, to convey meaning. And for example, for Mandarin Chinese and the word ma, well, I don't speak Chinese, but if I use a high tone like ma, in this case, ma means mother. But if I try to modulate my voice like ma, it means horse. So that's why it's important, okay, to use intonation. And furthermore, in addition, when we talk about prosody, we talk about these linguistic functions, but we talk also about paralinguistic function, like emotion, okay? So we give information about the emotional state of the speaker. And in this regard, I just selected a clip from a famous Italian movie. It's called La Vita è Bella, Life is Beautiful. The main character and the director of the movie is Roberto Benigni, who images the Holocaust, such a game. And the reward and the prize for winning this game in order to like protect his son, okay, and survive the horrors of the concentration camp. So in this clip, he translates the German soldier, okay? So you will listen to Italian and you have also English subtitles. So I just click on it and then we can talk.
Achtung! Ruhe! Gibt es hier einen Italiener, der Deutsch spricht? Che ha detto? Cerca uno che parla tedesco, spiega tutte le regole del campo. Che sia tedesco? No. Herren, ich sage das nur einmal. Comincia il gioco. Chi c'è c'è, chi non c'è non c'è. Ihr seid nur aus einem einzigen Grund in dieses Lager transportiert worden? Si vince a 1000 punti. Il primo classificato vince un carro armato, vero? Um zu arbeiten. Beato lui. Jeder Versuch der Sabotage wird mit dem sofortigen Tode bestraft. Die Hinrichtungen finden auf dem Hof durch Schüsse in den Rücken statt. Ogni giorno vi daremo la classifica generale da quell'altoparlante là. All'ultimo classificato verrà attaccato un cartello con su scritto Asino, qui sulla schiena. Ihr habt die Ehre, für unser großes deutsches Vaterland arbeiten zu dürfen und am Bau des Großdeutschen Reiches teilzunehmen. Noi facciamo la parte di quelli cattivi che urlano. Chi ha paura perde punti. 3 Grundregeln solltet ihr nie vergessen. Erstens, versuche nicht zu fliehen. Zweitens, folge jedem Befehl ohne Fragen. Drittens, jeder Versuch eines Aufstandes wird mit dem Tod durch Erhängen bestraft. Ist das klar? In 3 casi si perdono tutti i punti. Li perdono 1, quelli che si mettono a piangere. 2, quelli che vogliono vedere la mamma. 3, quelli che hanno fame e vogliono la merendina. Scordatevela!
Okay. So, of course, he didn't translate, okay, the German soldier. But the point here is that he mimic the soldier, okay? He used prosodic features like intonation and rhythm and also gestures in another language, in this case, well, in Italian. So prosody is important for language learners, but it's important also for translators. And in this, so that's why I choose another clip, okay? And this time, the clip is from a cartoon, the Aristocats, and it's important to say here that, well, the clip is about a song, okay? and introduce the main character. In this case, it's well, in English is Thomas O'Malley. It's a straw cat, okay, and in Italian we translated his name as Romeo. And this choice can be understood because the rhyme with Colosseo in the song, okay? So, io so Romeo, er meglio del Colosseo, so I'm the best of the Colosseum. And the choice of the translator in this case rely on the dialects from Rome, okay? So you will listen to Italian, but this is an Italian from Rome, because as you know, language and also identity and stereotyped, okay, are very, very, very interconnected, okay? Okay, I hope that you enjoyed this song.
Seguita Roma, ho fatto l'autostop e Francia e Giamber, penso che ci sto, ma pure da emigrato, mica so cambiato, io sono Romeo, meglio del Colosseo, io fermo, ci sto, proprio come va, se domani poi sarò, oggi chi lo sa, forse un po' macchinderò e me ne andrò in città, e poi laggiù tante scene farò, ogni carta che me vedrà dirà, anche permissione che simpaticone, quello è Romeo, per meglio del Colosseo.
Okay.
Very good. So what's the connection then, Francesca, between prosody and language acquisition? And how do we acquire prosody? How do we acquire prosodic features?
Yeah. I want to adjust this image here. Sorry, just one moment. Okay. Well, I just to explain in few words, okay, how well there are three things very important to say. The first one is that the first language acquisition, well, starts when the child is in the uterus, okay, in the womb, and the child memory of prosodic schemes begins to activate itself in the womb, because the child is already exposed to the mother's voice, okay? The second thing is that due to this exposure, it means that the child is tuned to the melody of speech. So the first aspect that the child acquires is prosodic competence, okay? And also many studies prove that the child is able to recognize different voices, and she prefers listening to the mother voice. But the point is that first the child acquires prosody, or what we call also suprasegmentals, and then the segmental property of speech. And there are, of course, differences and similarities between the first language acquisition and the second language acquisition. But in second language acquisition, many factors affecting language learning, such as the motivation of the learner, or the period of fossilization, the age in which you start to learn a foreign language, or the period, the length of period that you spend in the language in the L2 speaking country. So it's a very, very complicated, to produce a new sound and to develop a new phonological system in a foreign language. So that's why training, for example, is important.
So this obviously brings me to the next question then, and that's why is the teaching of prosody neglected in the classroom still? And then what are the main issues related to the teaching of it in the classroom situation? How would it be taught?
Yeah, because the first issue is related to the theoretical framework, because there is a lack of theoretical framework underpinning the acquisition of foreign language prosody. And this is due to the complex nature itself of prosody. The second issue is related to the absence of a didactic shared method to teach prosody, because we know that there are many techniques like drama techniques, mirroring, revoicing activities or imitation task and so on, but we don't know which is the best method. Okay, so researchers didn't reach a consensus on how to teach effectively prosody. And also Barrera Pardo in 2004 defined this kind of linguistic paradox because, well, we have language teachers, they want to teach prosody, but they don't have guidelines to do it, okay? And on the other side, we have language learners, and they want to just to be more comfortable, okay, when they try to communicate in the target language, and just to sound more native speaker, or just to be more comprehensible. But again, there is a lack of training and courses devoted to the study of prosody. So recently, thanks to technology, we can try to teach intonation, for example, through speech visualization software, because for example, Pratt allows you to record your voice and visualize your intonational cue, okay, on the monitor, and to compare your performance, okay, your contours with those of native speakers, and to repeat again and again, to reach the target model. So it's beyond listen and repeat, because you can visualize it, okay? And so we have a solid a framework underpinning this kind of task. It's called the dual coding of Paivio, because you use two channels, okay, while you learn a language. So it should be more effective in this way. But of course, there are many difficulties, because it's difficult to interpret, the intonational cue, understand where there is a mistake, and how and if it's appropriate to correct it, So we need to do research in this field. That's the point.
And big issues, I think, as well, Francesca, for teacher training, obviously, when you're looking at this, obviously big implications there. So I know you've recently finished your PhD in Galway. So can you tell us about that and give us a general overview of your work?
Yes, I prepared this slide about my research design. And so, well, mastering prosodic feature is one of the most important and challenging tasks when you acquire a second language, a foreign language. And in February 2018, the Council of Europe published a new companion volume for a new companion volume devoted to promote the prosodic competence in a foreign language and to teach them. So this is a very, very, very important, but researchers didn't reach a consensus on how to teach it. And also it's not clear if and how learners acquire and develop a new phonological systems. But on the other side, there are many studies on phonological studies on contrastive analysis that claim that this kind of analysis is relevant. It's important to define, for example, the intonational models to be taught, or for, you know, the establishment, the formulation of hypotheses about the process of learning, and also about the difficulties learners may encounter in language learning. So that's why my thesis stems from a contrastive phonological analysis between two varieties, in this case not languages but varieties. So the first one varieties is La Spezia Italian, because I come from La Spezia, and so that's my variety. And the other variety is Galway Irish English, because this experiment was carried out more or less 3 years ago at the National University of Ireland, Galway, here in Galway, and I taught intonation, Italian intonation to my students, okay? So first of all, I recorded people, well, from my city and from Galway as well, to find the phonological system of these two varieties and to create hypotheses about that. The second step was to create an explicit prosodic and pragmatic as well training. And I created, including pre and a post-test, to monitor and also prove if a kind of improvement occurs during and after the training. I divided my group in two groups, one a control group and experimental one. And at the end, I analyzed their L2 speech production. I compared them with the native language models, and also to the target and the target intonational models, just to confirm and verify my hypothesis. So my findings were, first, it's possible to teach intonation, to teach prosody, okay? And my students improved towards the native model. Some of them reached the target pattern. And also I gave a first overview of the phonological system of these two varieties, and also an overview about what kind of intonational deviation from the norm Irish speakers do in Italian when they learn Italian.
Very good. So just to wrap up, to finish up then, Francesca, what do you think the future holds for prosodic research within applied linguistics?
Well, first of all, I hope a replication of my research design, because it works, but I'd like to see if it works also in another, languages combinations. So not just Italian and English, but, Spanish and Chinese and so on. And also there is a need to, for example, increase the number of subjects, because it's very, very complicated when you do research in this field to get an increased number of participants, and also the target sentences that I used in my research, they needed to increase as well. And also we need to go on with this research, not to just focus on intonation, but also on, for example, on rhythm. And so find out new rhythmic patterns, and in a contrastive phonological way. So I hope that also this kind of studies will be carried out, conducted, and yes, more or less this is the future of this field.
That's great. Well, thank you very much indeed, Francesca. And I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Laura McLaughlin, who's going to deal with questions from the audience.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you, John, for this very informative interview. Very interesting. Francesca, we have a question here from Quinton. And the question is, as a language instructor, I've found that students often find practicing prosody very funny or embarrassing. So the question is, I'm wondering if you think that this is because it isn't something that they are used to, or whether it is more something to do with prosody itself. What do you think?
Well, this depends on the type of students that you have. For example, here in Ireland, I have, not always, but often, my students are so shy. Okay, so at the very beginning of the training, they avoid to speak aloud. Also, in the language lab. Okay, and but I think that they have to get used to do it. That's the point, because when they started to do it, they have fun. So I collected questionnaires at the end of my training. My students felt more comfortable speaking Italian language. So at the beginning, they have some problems related to how to use Pratt and record voices, and just identify the errors. But in general, they were happy and very proud also of themselves, because it was something new. And as you know, if you surprise your students, there will be like a success on the acquisition of prosody in this case.
Thank you. And we have some other questions. I was wondering if there is any difference that you're aware of about how tonal languages like Chinese or Thai, for example, are taught, as opposed to non-tonal languages, in relation to prosody, I presume.
Okay, well, actually, I'm not an expert of tonal languages. So, well, I don't know if there is a difference, but I think that in this case, prosodic grammar would be very beneficial. So I just suggest you do this kind of research and to create a prosodic grammar, maybe a prosodic contrastive grammar. Between Chinese and English, for example, because without teaching and learning intonation or rhythm in tonal language, it's impossible to communicate and to learn tonal language. That's what I think.
And Emily asks, does your research show that learning prosody is easier from some people than others? Or do humans have the same capacity for prosody acquisition?
That's a very good question, because honestly, there is no method to measure a prosodic competence. So we can use, for example, some parameters like intelligibility, comprehensibility, but there is not a scientific way, okay, to measure prosodic competence. And I think that it depends also on on personal aptitude. There are people who easily imitate native speakers, and there are people that are not talented at all to do it, but the training would be beneficial as well.
And in relation to training, we have another question, training and improvements. So do you find that with your students there was improvement besides the huge work that you described? Did you also check whether your students' improvements were only short-term or also long-term?
Yes, at the end of the training, after 2 weeks, I also created, administered a delayed post-test. But honestly, I didn't analyze it in my thesis because I'm working on it now, actually.
Yes, I suppose longitudinal studies take a long time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a question of time, yes. Also, another question from Alessia. When I talk about intonation and prosody, people are not always sure what I'm talking about. And I think Italian speakers are not fully aware of defining their pitch when they are, for example, asking a question. So do you think it is possible to learn another language prosody if you are not fully aware of your own? Interesting.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And I think that you need to understand the prosody of your language to better understand the prosody of the target language, of course. This happens for prosody, but also for grammar, you know, syntax and any kind or any aspect of language. So also for prosody, absolutely.
So you need to start from a reflection on your own first language first. Yes.
Yes. And that's what I did in the classroom, actually, because yes, I just gave my students explicit instruction about the intonational cue and the target models, but we discussed also, for example, how to create a polar questions in English, if you use like, you know, question word or not, or something like that. So yes.
And this actually leads into very nicely into the next question. So it's about teaching prosody. Is it, first of all, is it possible to download your PhD thesis? And then again, Maria Paula says, I'm interested, in the method you used for teaching prosody. So did you teach Toby to your students?
Oh, no, I don't think so. No, but that's that's a very interesting question. Well, my thesis not yet. Well, you can't download it yet because I'm working on it. Because I'm writing my monograph based on my PhD dissertation, so that's why you can't download it. But if you have any question, please contact me, write me an email. I'm available to, you know, to meet you for any kind of clarification or question like this. And okay, so I didn't
teach Toby.
Toby, but I teach how to read the intonational cue. Okay, so for example, when you visualize your intonational cue, it's the blue line, and this is what we call the fundamental frequency. Okay, so this is the track, and also if there is a peak, okay, on the strong syllable or not, or about the boundary tones at the end, if this is a high tone or a low tone. So I try to use, basic terminology to explain how to interpret the intonational cue. And Toby, it's useful if you want to analyze them, but you know, as a researcher, not to teach in the foreign
students.
To students. Yeah.
And again, on your experiment, I was interested in the design of your research experiment. Asked the next questions by Georgia, and was wondering if you could elaborate more on what features of prosody you monitored in your students, for example, intonation, pitch, stress, etc. And if you found that some features were easier than others to acquire.
That's an interesting question. Okay, so yeah, they had difficulties okay, for contrastive focus statements and for polar questions, mostly, okay? And yes, I teach the intonational model and also the stress position. So I used different kind of sentences. There were 4 kind of sentences: broad focus statement, contrastive focus statement, polar question, and open questions. And I used also proparoxyton, paroxyton, and oxyton words, okay, as a target words. And I don't know if I have here just to show you. Sorry, yeah? Because maybe if I show this picture, it's a little bit clear when we talk about. Okay. So, for example, this is the line, okay? This is a sentence in Italian: voglio le mandorle, I want almonds, okay? In the first case, for example, this is a statement, io voglio le mandorle. And the second one is a rhetorical question: voglio le mandorle? Okay, so in this case, you have, for example, a peak of intonation here on the metrically strongly syllable man, and at the end you go up. Okay, so you can see a kind of a modulation of your voice. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. And
I don't know if I answered the question actually, because yes, Laura, I think so.
I think you did.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so there's another one. I've heard frequently a claim that people who have musical ability are better at learning languages. So I wonder if you think that that could be true, and if so, if it is because of easier acquisition of prosody.
Oh, well, yeah, I think that's true, because music and prosody are closely related. I'm not expert in music and prosody, but I can say that that's true, because you have to sharpen your ears. Okay, when you listen to prosody, the first step is listen to it and then try to reproduce the sounds. So if you're got used to listen to music, for example, it's better when you have to acquire prosodic features.
And Gail asks, again, thank you very much. Do you know if there is any research on prosody on English as a lingua franca? International English, where, for example, Chinese and Italian L1 speakers are communicating in a virtual environment through English. Do the same native prosody rules apply if different speakers are?
Honestly, no. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, not part of your research.
Nope. I was wondering, no, because it's Chinese. I'm just thinking about Japanese, but no. And the English as a lingua franca, no. Sorry.
I think we don't have any other questions. No, I think, John, I can hand over to you now to wrap up, if you like.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you very much. There was much interest in your talk. Very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Laura, and thanks again, Francesca. We had a great discussion with lots of interested people in the audience, and thanks to Francesca for her time, and thanks to you all for coming. We're finishing up a little bit early, which is fine because it's time for dinner now. Just to announce our next talk, the final CAM lecture of 20 to 2021 will be on Thursday, the 15th of April at the same time at 6 p.m. With Anna Bauczkowska from the University of Gdansk in Poland, and she'll be speaking about corpus linguistic tools in language acquisition research. So we hope to see as many of you as possible at the next talk for the final CAM seminar. So thank you all for coming and have a very nice evening.